My name is Jason Snell. I'm a alum of the IMA low-res program, which is it's a one-year master's program that's in New York, Berlin, and then Shanghai. And I spent a couple years in New York, so I was on the floor quite a bit at ITP. And the software I'm showing today is something originally I developed for my classmates and then later for my students. I ended up teaching for a year at Collaborative Arts at Tisch in the city. And it started as a P5 project. And so for everyone that is, made their way through or making their way through a P5 class, it can lead to full software development. It's a very cool platform. And just in general, I've meditated, made electronic music, and have programmed computers for a number of decades, and that's what led to this work, is a combination of those things. I'll start with Ableton. In general, I'm just going to describe some of the basics of Ableton and MIDI first, and then I'll head over to the custom software and talk about brainwaves and how to channel brainwaves into Ableton. So building blocks first and then get more complex. Just a show of hands or just kind of shout out, has anyone here used Ableton before? Yes or no? Yes? Okay. It is a software that's on version 12 by now, so it has gotten more complicated and more advanced over the years. But the way we'll be using it today is fairly simple. Essentially, I'll be loading up some synthesizers, at first quite basic, and then hopefully we can shape them a little bit, and then routing MIDI channels into Ableton. Is anyone here familiar with MIDI? I'm guessing the Ableton person.
Yeah.
Anyone else have used MIDI as a way to send signals between different devices or in your projects, or any other MIDI folks? A little bit? All right. I'll give a basics of MIDI. MIDI is musical instrument digital interface and is a way for electronic instruments to talk to each other. So a drum machine can sync up with a synthesizer, with a sequencer. When laptops and different music software came up, MIDI was this language. So I could have Ableton send commands to my synthesizer or my drum machine, and vice versa. So it's a communication protocol. And there are a number of ways that MIDI can communicate. There's a few dedicated channels. The first channel I'll mention it's just notes. So if I play keys on a keyboard, the notes that I press, how long I press it, how hard I press the key on the keyboard, that becomes a MIDI signal. So it's called MIDI note. And I grab this, I've got this little MIDI keyboard, and this is just for example. You don't need a MIDI keyboard today. Your brain would become the MIDI keyboard. But just to show you how this works. So as I press a key, do you hear a little beep coming out of Crystal's computer? So that's, even though I'm playing keys on this physical keyboard, it's triggering notes in Ableton. And right now, if you can see the screen, this first channel, that's this column I've highlighted on the left. Do you see that green LED showing the audio signal? Are you able to see that, Crystal? Yep.
We are. I'm trying to enlarge the shared screen.
Sure. And the way that's coming in is, I might have to zoom in more, but there's this panel here that says all channels. And it has this little flash of yellow, and that means a MIDI note signal is coming in. So when I press the keyboard, this little yellow LED lights up. I can choose a specific channel for it to come over, but for purposes right now, I'm just going to do all channels. And then the second way that MIDI can communicate is through something called a continuous controller. It's also known as a control change, and that sounds intimidating, but it's actually, I have a different MIDI controller. A continuous controller just means a knob. So as I turn a knob on a synthesizer, or this is just like a generic MIDI controller with knobs at the top, as I turn a knob, that's sending a signal into MIDI, and instead of it being an on-off, like a note, when I turn the knob, if I turn it all the way to the left, it's going to be 0. And then when I turn it all the way up, it's going to go to the maximum. And the maximum in MIDI is 127. It's 127 because it is an unsigned integer 8. But essentially these are, coming from ITP, these are potentiometers. So each knob on a keyboard, it's got a far left position, it's got a far right position, and in MIDI, it creates a knob turn. So when I do a knob turn on a MIDI device, it doesn't automatically do something in Ableton like it does with a keyboard. So when I play the keyboard, it automatically has that. It's listening for notes because that's used so often in Ableton. But with the knob turn, I have to do something called MIDI mapping. So what I'm going to do is a control in here, I'm going to tell it what knob to turn in my Ableton interface. So for example, let's see. We've got these sends, and these are effect sends. And so I can click and drag it with my mouse to turn it up. And what that will do is it turns up the reverb or delay. So these are effects sends. So this is the reverb send, which is this column over here. And then this is the delay send. What I'm going to do is I'm going to map 2 knobs, one to send A and one to send B, just to show you how this external controller can change something in Ableton. Again, you don't need this for the demo today. We'll be using brainwaves to turn those knobs later, but for now, we're going to use these keyboard knobs. So the way that you do MIDI mapping is you select the thing you want to MIDI map. So when I click it, there's this little box that forms, these little edges around the knob. And I'm going to go up to, where is MIDI map? There it is. So under options, edit MIDI map. You can also hit Control M, but this is an easy way to find. So options, edit MIDI map. And then the whole interface changed. We've got these purple boxes and all these purple highlights on the buttons, including the knobs that we want to change. And what purple means is that I can MIDI map something to it. So anything that's purple on the screen, I could get a keyboard or these knobs or these sliders to change it. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose that send A, and then I'm going to turn the first knob here, and keep an eye on that. So that little white box popped up, and what that means is the mapping happened successfully. I'll delete it just so you can see it happen again. So I'm going to delete the mapping, and I'm going to select A, and then I'm going to turn this knob, and then boom, that little white box showed up. And for the second one, I'm going to select B. I'm going to turn the second knob here. So this will be A and this will be B. So I turn that, and then it mapped. So I'm going to leave MIDI mapping. And now I'm back on the normal screen for playback. So now when I physically turn this knob, do you see that changing the A knob on the screen? And then this is the B knob. So this is just to show this is what MIDI mapping is. It's having something outside of the software control elements in the software. Any other questions about MIDI before I hop over to neuroscience? The neuroscience part might be easier than the MIDI part, but it's important to cover both.
Interesting.
I think it's clear for me.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the software that I made using P5 and JavaScript. It only works in Chrome, and that's because Chrome is able to do web Bluetooth. And in order to connect to the Muse headset, it's a Bluetooth connection. So Safari doesn't have web Bluetooth. I think it used to, but it doesn't anymore. Maybe there's other browsers that use web Bluetooth, but Chrome is a common browser that will be able to connect this. So you do need to load up the page in Chrome. I will copy and paste the URL. So this is a public URL. It's an open source project. I'll open the chat and put that link in there. And otherwise, it's primary-assembly.com/apps/mind-control. So you lined up, when you load up Mind Control, initially it shows the live data tab. So there's two tabs here. One is the live data, which we'll see once we put on the headset. And then the second tab, which will make sense now that we've talked about Ableton, is MIDI mapping. And you'll see that there's these different columns and then these different states. So these are the different states that we can detect through the Muse 2, the Muse headband. We can detect sensor noise, and by sensor noise it just means the headset is off, or it's just like lying on the table, or it's on your head in such a loose way that it's not actually picking up your brain. It's just like, it's just noise. Sometimes that's useful to sonify, or you can cut the volume when the sensor noise happens. That way, if you're creating an installation, someone has the headset on and they take it off, if they keep hearing music, even though it might be making music from this blast of electromagnetic noise that is just in the room, it's good to be able to change the experience significantly when it stops reading the brain and it's just off. So sometimes I cut the volume, so you take the thing off and it cuts the volume, and that's what usually makes sense for a user in an immersive experience. Other times I convert it to like a noise or like a big reverb, but I interfere the signal in some way so people understand, okay, I've taken it off and it's no longer making music from my brain. It's off. Also, it can be good for detecting if it's a good fit. So, like I said, if it's kind of loose, you're going to have a lot of noise, and so it helps you understand if it's on someone's head correctly. The second thing is jaw or face tension. So that means the headset's on, and it's on, but it might be a little loose, or I might be stressed out. And so I might be like furrowing my brow, I might be clenching my jaw, I might be blinking, even just kind of leaning forward, and the muscles in your neck, they actually go up and wrap around the top of your head into the forehead muscle. And so even just leaning forward and kind of holding tension will be picked up by the EEG as muscle tension. And so it's not a brainwave signal, but it is a valid biometric. It is something that you can choose to sonify. For muscle tension, sometimes I'll add a little distortion, or do something that creates a little bit of a stress sound. However, do keep in mind that anything that you choose to sonify, any sort of biometric or mental state that you choose to sonify, will reward the brain. And so if you sonify stressful states, that will entice people to stay in a stressful state, because they'll be like, oh, cool, I'm controlling this, and they'll get stressed, and they'll hear something, and they'll be like, oh, I want to control more, and they get more stress, and they do more. So when you're designing a soundscape for brainwave sonification or biometric sonification, think about what are your targets, like where do you want to lead someone. In contrast, if you just want to sonify a relaxed state, and people, really don't hear anything until they start to close their eyes and calm down, or start to get more settled in their seat, and then they start to hear some sounds come up, that will reward them and entice them to go into that relaxed state. So it's kind of a combination of giving some sort of information to the user about what state they're in, combined with what do you want to reward? Where do you want to lead them? You could sonify all of them and be like, good luck, like make your own path, or you can sonify certain things. Then we get into the brainwave states. So the first one that this particular software picks up on with these headbands is mental focus. So once the fit is good and the person relaxes and the forehead isn't giving off tension, it picks up. I trained this. It's an ML model using ML5. So it was trained on me like coding, like typing an email or computer programming. So it's a focus state where you're doing something active and being attentive. The next state down is clear mind. I'm going to change the name of this as to quiet mind. So that's when you're kind of zoned out and you just kind of let everything go. You're not trying to meditate, you're not focusing, you're not trying to do anything. You're just kind of letting go of everything. And all the amplitudes go down and it becomes a bit of a quiet signal. And that can be sonified in interesting ways. So you could soundify it by reducing volumes on other things. Sometimes I create this type of airy sound, which sounds like a realm of dust or a nirvana, just this kind of clear field of sound, kind of a field of existence sound. And sometimes I'll bring that up if I go into a quiet mind. That can be an interesting way to sonify that. And then with focus, I usually choose sounds which are more, I usually use electronic music, so like synth sounds or something that's more active and bubbly, something that feels like active thought. And when we look at each of these states, you can consider each one as kind of like a scene in a film, and you are the composer for that film. So what sort of creative decisions would you make to score or create sounds of like mental focus or a clear mind or tension? So those are decisions that are going to be mediated through your own musicianship or your own artistry. And then the next two are meditative state. And so that's typically my eyes are closed, I'm starting to relax, I'm starting to let go, I'm surrendering into a meditation, and alpha waves increase. And so you can sonify that in a way. I usually, with alpha state, I will make the EQ a little bit softer. I'll take out the high end, or I'll use a filter to filter out the highs of a sound, and make something sound a bit more dreamier, a bit more relaxed, a bit more subdued. Sometimes I'll boost the bass, or I'll bring in sounds that are pad sounds, kind of like generic spa music, so that you have these pads come in. So that's a way that you can soundify a meditative state. And then dreamy state usually doesn't come up on this build. It usually doesn't come up for if someone is at an installation. It's really, you have to knock out. You have to really actually be falling asleep, which, if you're about to take a nap and put it on, you can trigger dream state. But dreamy state would be the sounds that you want to merge in the composition, or the sounds you want to take out in the composition when you start falling asleep. The other states we'll get into, so we've got sensor noise, muscle tension, we've got 4 different brainwave states, and then we get into some of the other sensors. So head movement, there is a accelerometer and gyroscope in the headset. So I'm taking the accelerometer, and it has an X, Y, and Z axis. So as I move my head, it will respond to that movement. And if I wanted, I could trigger sounds that way. So I could do something acoustically to show that maybe my posture is like starting to cave in myself. Or maybe I want to open a filter when I put my head back and close a filter when I put it forward, or open a sound or close a sound through that type of movement. It also responds to a Z-axis, like ear to shoulder is the Y-axis, and then shaking your head is the Z-axis. And then the nod is the X. So if you want, there is an accelerometer in there. And then the last section is for the heart. And there's 2 things. One is the blood flow. So it's a PPG laser that shines on your forehead. It's a little red laser that turns on when the headset is on. And it shines a laser on your skin, and it detects increases and decreases in the blood flow. And with that, you can figure out the heartbeat or sonify your heartbeat in a certain way. So this blood flow state, essentially it's just this sine wave that's going up and down. So sometimes you could create maybe a soundscape that is bassy and kind of white noisy, something that sounds like the womb, or something that's like a blood flow, and just have the volume go up and down in that sound. So it's like a or you can have it send off a note. So every time the software detects when there's a peak in that flow, and every time that it detects a heartbeat, it sends a MIDI signal. You can trigger a MIDI note as if you're playing a key on a keyboard, and you could trigger that sound over in Ableton. So sometimes I've used kind of a soft kick drum that ends up sounding like a heartbeat. You put a little bit of a delay on it. It's like, and that's coming from your live heartbeat. And so that can be a really interesting biometric to use as well. And then the last thing, I don't know if we'll get in this today because I think we'll be able to cover a lot with the other states, but that heartbeat that is going over, the speed of the heartbeat is also being detected by the software. And so you get beats per minute, just like if you're a DJ and you're playing a techno track at 130 beats per minute or 140 beats per minute. So with that BPM, it can send a clock signal over to Ableton and set the BPM of the entire project with this MIDI clock. So my heartbeat, instead of just triggering a sound or like opening and closing a kind of a heartbeat volume with blood flow, you can have your heartbeat control the tempo of the overall Ableton project. So it's an interesting way to control all the sounds. And sometimes you have effects that are linked to tempo, like the delay, or there's some other effects that an echo or delay that are linked to the key, the main BPM. All of those would change in time with your heartbeat. So that's an interesting way, and you start to have this kind of cybernetic relationship between your body and the software. So, it's really starting to respond to all different types of biometric signals. So I'm taking off the headset and I'm turning it on. So there's a little power button on the right arm. And then when it's on, you'll see this has a white light that starts to glow. And I'm just going to hit reload on the web page. What I hit is the Connect to Muse button, and it pops up this window that lists the different muses. Did the pop-up window show up on the screen share? Sometimes it doesn't with Zoom screen share. Where is it? Do you see where it says Muse 98B2? Okay, great. So I select that muse. If there's multiple muses in the room, you can choose the one that's yours. And then you click pair. And so the first thing you'll see is this really chaotic white line. And when we go over to the machine learning states, so these are the same states as they're listed on the MIDI mapping tab, it's showing that this is all device noise. So this isn't my brain, this isn't my muscle tension, this is just pure noise. And so that shows that the EEG is not in my head. And then when I put it on, it's like old school headphones. So they expand and collapse. I don't know if anyone here, I don't know if you know like vintage Walkman, but they open and close like that. There's probably something newer that I could refer to. And so I put it on loose and then I tighten it. And so I'm tightening these arms on both sides. And it's just a little bit above my eyebrows. It can be as high as middle of the forehead, but as long as it's not on the eyebrows, because that's just going to be noise. We want a good connection to the skin on the forehead. And really, I'm using these two front sensors, so it's about getting a real strong connection on these front two sensors. There are also sensors on the ears, but I often don't use them. And on this software, I'm not using them. They tend to be a bit noisier, so I'm just using the front sensors. And so as I'm talking, so I've got the headset on, it's a pretty good fit. It's tight enough that it's tugging the back of my ears, and I feel a real snug fit across my forehead. And so we see that's no longer a noise, but it's dropping down, particularly as I touch it, it's dropping down into muscle tension. So if I blink and kind of move my jaw, or just the fact that I'm talking, muscle is being detected. And then when I stop talking, it should drop down into the brainwave state, so I'll give that a chance. So you see how focused then went. Because I'm presenting, I'm mostly in a focus state. And now that I'm talking, it goes back to muscle. So I'm detecting just those two biometrics first. I've got muscular movement in my face, and then when I start to sit quietly, it moves into focus. And then I'll try clearing my mind and see if I can get some of that clear bar to go up. Give me a second. I could put this on Michael and he could drop down to meditation real quickly. So we got some of that clear mind. Did you see that bar go up? Okay. I'm also printing out the brainwaves. I'm not using them directly. The ML model I created because they're states that most people can control. Like most people can try to clear their mind. Most people can focus on something. If I ask someone, hey, increase your alpha or increase your gamma, you're just like, I don't know how to do that. You're like, maybe advanced meditators could. So that's why I do these machine learning states, because it makes it more controllable as a software. The other thing we see is this, and so that white line, as it gets clear, a good signal, that white line is just going to be down on the bottom of the screen. So it's going to be this nice signal, and then it's going to spike a little bit on the left side. And most of this is muscular movement. This low end is going to be these larger signals coming from my forehead muscle. And I need to create a version with columns, but this section next to it would be theta, and then you've got alpha, which is a meditative state. You've got a larger section in the middle, which is beta, and then the signal at the top of the white line is gamma, or on the far right. So that's the output of the EEG. That's the electricity post fast Fourier transform, if you're a math nerd. It's called a power spectral density, another nerdy neuroscience term. But essentially it's an array of amplitudes. It's very similar to an EQ on a stereo. So you've got your bass, which is down here in delta. You've got your mids, which are going to be your alpha and beta, and then you've got your highs on the right side, which is your gamma. So it's you could also visualize this as an EQ with a bunch of bars, but this one just happens, I've designed as a straight line. And this whole visualization is a P5 project. So the other thing it picks up, unless it's a noise signal in which I block the heart rate detection, but if it's a good enough fit, I'm detecting BPM. So it looks like I'm around 60, upper 50s. And then it takes a little bit longer and a clear connection to start doing heart rate variability. I'm not MIDI mapping that now, but I just added that recently because I also want to chart heart rate variability. That's a really good indicator of if someone's in a kind of an active, a little bit stressed out state, or if someone's relaxing and their system is more open and responsive. But what we are charting and outputting as MIDI is this BPM. And that's the red line. So that red line that you see kind of going up and down in the middle of the screen, that's the flow of blood that's going through that red PPG sensor that's on the headset. And so you get a sense of my blood flow. And what the software is doing is when it gets to a peak, it then says, hey, that was a heartbeat, and starts counting the BPMs in that way. This little dot that happens next to where it says heart and HRV, that dot flashes on when the software thinks that's a heartbeat, looking at the peaks and valleys in the red light. So it's just this little red dot where my mouse is. And then the last thing that is on this chart is head movement. And so if I move my head down, there's these lines in the middle. So this is down, this is up. So you see this gray line going down and up. And then ear to shoulder left, ear to shoulder right, is these diagonal lines. And then if I shake my head, I'm going to get movement on this horizontal axis, which is Z. So again, if you want to sonify head movement in some way, that can be done through MIDI as well. So I turn MIDI mapping. Right now, everything's off. Everything's unchecked, so it's not streaming anything over to Ableton. And the one thing I need to show, you only have to do this once on a Mac, but there needs to be a bridge between Chrome and Ableton. And that bridge is something called an IAC driver. It's just a nerdy thing on the Mac. And the way you activate that bridge between Chrome, the MIDI software, and Ableton is you open up your audio MIDI setup. And in your window, I'm going to hide audio devices. Under Window, you want to show MIDI Studio if it's hidden, because it's a MIDI device. And so this will look different based on the different types of MIDI devices you've plugged into your computer over time. And it's on all Macs. It's a built-in part of the Mac, and it's called the IAC driver. And with this little driver, you can double-click it, and it opens up this window that says IAC driver properties. And you want to make sure this checkbox is checked. By default, it's unchecked. And so you want to check this so the device is online. Sometimes you have to click this little bus text that pops up, and then you click apply. And so you only have to do that once. You don't have to do it every time, but you just have to do it once. Is open up IAC driver and check devices online. And you click apply. And that becomes a bridge, and then you can close that. That becomes a bridge between Chrome and Ableton. And then in Ableton, before I activate any MIDI, you go to Live and then Settings. And inside Settings, you go to MIDI. And you'll see that IAC driver that we just activated is now showing up as a port. So we've got IAC driver. And we're receiving inputs from the IAC driver, meaning it's going from Chrome to IAC driver into Ableton. And so I'm activating, I'm checking 3 of these boxes. So it's track. I don't know why they use these names, track, sync, and remote. Essentially it means MIDI notes, MIDI clock is sync, and then remote is that those knob turns, that continuous controller. I don't know why they just don't say note, clock, and CC, but anyways, just check those 3 boxes, and then Chrome can, the messages coming from Chrome through IAC driver can be received by Ableton. Any questions on that? That is kind of again, you only have to do that once, and once it's set up, it's good. All right. So in the MIDI mapping tab on Mind Control, I'm going to activate Send Clock. Hopefully this works. Sometimes it doesn't. And then I'm going to hit, the way that you receive a clock from an external source in Ableton is you click this little external sync button. External is on, and this little yellow button is now flashing. That's my BPM, the BPM of my heart. And then in this gray window here, we now see the BPM of my heart. So it's 47. So my heart is now setting the BPM of the Ableton project. If we were, I think a real simple thing that you could do is, I'm going to just put a kick drum and play it, and we'll hear the speed of that kick drum change based on my heart rate. So I'm going to do a search for kick, DS kick, drop it in here, and I don't want it triggered by MIDI notes. I'm just going to create a loop on my own, and we need to make it a quarter note. So that's my heart. So if I were to run around the room, this beat would speed up, and the way that the tempo is changing on this kick is my heart, my relaxation. And so it's going to go up and down in a pretty organic way. And then you could shape this heart rate. I'm going to make it a little bit softer, so it sounds a little more subdued. increase the decay. Maybe bring it up to like 50 hertz. So you can do some sound design to make it sound like a heart. I'm going to put a little bit of a delay on it to make a lub-dub, because right now it's just boom, it's lub but not lub-dub. So I'm going to drop a delay here. And I'm going to speed this up, turn down the feedback. There we go. So it's like a heartbeat sound coming from Ableton, coming from my body. So the tempo of my heart is telling Ableton to play at a certain speed. Can everyone hear that heartbeat sound? How about in the room? Okay. You can hear my heart speeding up. Okay. Did that answer your question about MIDI clock and Ableton?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Awesome. Yeah, it's just this external click. All right. Let's head back to the mind control software, and I can see I'm in focus quite a bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to trigger notes in Ableton based on my focus state. And essentially what it's doing is it's looking for peaks. So when there's a peak in my focus, it'll fire off a note in Ableton. So let's try that. Each of these states has their own MIDI channel. And then I can turn the note on and off with these checkboxes. So mental focus is MIDI channel 3, and I'm going to activate it here. Okay, well, I have a synth already lined up, and right now it's on all channels, and so I want it to just respond to focus, so I'm going to bring it down to channel 3. So those are peaks in my focus state. I'm not going to say it's really musical yet, but that's my focus state triggering those notes. I'm going to create another channel, MIDI channel, and I'm going to send it to channel 2. And back in Ableton, I'm also going to activate my tension, muscle tension. And so let's do, I'm going to mute the focus for a second. Muscle tension, let's do a sound that's a little gritty. So maybe in Wavetable we can do like there's some gritty bass sounds, maybe acid bass. Okay, so we'll use that for muscle tension. All right, let's try to make that a little prettier. All right, so it's kind of responding. Let me turn the volume down on that. So if I blink or like flex my forehead, it's gonna go. I want to pitch it down a little bit. So there's a lot of MIDI tools that you can use to change this note that's coming in. So I want to pitch it down. See if I'm triggering. And we increase the decay. There we go. And then I'm going to put a randomizer on the note, so it's not always the same note over and over. Let's move this up. We have intervals of like 6. And maybe make it a little bit longer. And then turn down a little bit. And I'm going to label it. So I'm going to call this muscle sounds. So it's a way that you could soundify stress. I'm not going to say that's most musical, but it is a way to soundify it. I'm going to mute that for a second, and I'm going to go over to my focus state. And I'll just do these two. So I'm going to shape it a little bit. Do some of the same randomization. I'm going to put some effects on it. Maybe choices down a little bit. Go to sub or by. Actually, I'm going to put an arpeggiator on here. It's not quite focus state because the way it's shifting. The reason it's bending is because the tempo change. And let's increase the steps. I have to get a focus state. It's triggering clear. Interesting. It can be tricky to like get into a mental state while composing. Like you're like, okay, I need to meditate, but then you're like coding or, oh, there we go. Let's increase the speed of this. Okay, so we've got a tension sound. There we go. So we've got a tension sound and we've got a focus sound. And obviously this is something you could tweak and like, you know, shape the sounds to your heart's delight. Let's turn on the tension sound. So I've got my heartbeat, a tension sound, and focus sounds. Any questions about that? I will mute these for a second so I can hear everyone. So I'll do Clear Mind, just to show you one example. It's a little trickier because in order to map a CC, it's called continuous controller, essentially a knob turn on a synth. I want to show what that's like, because notes are just on-offs. I want to show you what that is. In order to do that, I actually have to reload the page and not be streaming anything, because if I try to map a CC to Ableton while I'm streaming, all the different signals coming from the headset will try to map to that parameter in Ableton. So I have to shut down the headset for this one thing. So let's go over to Ableton. I'm going to delete those. I'm going to create a just like a white noise sound. I can do that through operator. And create a new channel, drag operator to it. I'm going to create a loop in operator. And this is all Ableton stuff. This should just be a tone. Yep, and I have to turn this back up. And then I want to switch that tone to white noise. So sine wave, I want to do noise white. That's too harsh. And I'm going to put a filter on the white noise. Auto filter. Turn that on. Oops, wrong one. Let's do an EQ8 instead. So I'm creating a white noise signal and I'm shaping it so it's a little more pleasant. And I'm gonna put a reverb on it. Okay, so I've got this looping white noise sound, and what I want to do is when I clear my mind, the white noise comes up. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to do MIDI mapping. So I'm going to change the volume of the white noise. I'm going to select this. I'm going to go into that edit MIDI mapping mode that I showed you earlier. I select the volume on that white noise channel. And I go back to mind control, clear mind, and I hit this little map button. What that does, it sends just a single signal of this MIDI channel. It's the same as me like turning a knob on that controller earlier. So I'm just gonna hit map once, and I see that it's now mapping. I've got this little white box that says 4/20. That means channel 4, MIDI CC 20. And if I then activate this checkbox, it should then, the clear mind is now sending that MIDI CC command over to Ableton. But as you remember, I turned off the headset. This MIDI CC thing needs to be improved in terms of the flow. It's the most complicated thing of the whole system. So I just wanted to show it to you once. So I'm going to reconnect. All right. So now in Ableton, do you see this? I'm going to turn off the other ones for a second. Do you see this volume going up and down? So if I talk or if I focus, this volume slider on the white noise goes down. But if I move into a quiet mind, it's like a zero, that 0 to 127. I'm moving that slider up and down by shifting into a quiet state. So it goes down when I'm in an active state and I'm talking, and then when I relax. The volume goes up. So you could compose all through MIDI CCs, just moving the volume up and down on different soundscapes. That you could make these elaborate soundscapes, like one for focus, one for meditation, one for a clear mind, and then just have those volume changes. And I use that a lot in the sound baths. And then you can also have these note triggers coming in on top of it. So this is my focus peaks. It's kind of hard to quiet my mind. So we've got MIDI clock, we've got notes from mental state peaks, and then we've got those knob changes or those volume changes from a mental state going up and down. I think that covers all of the basic functionality. I'm not going to say this is the most musical pretty thing, but I can send this Ableton file over to Crystal if she wants to share with folks, something that's already wired in. And the fun of it is then creating your own soundscapes, like figuring out what does meditation sound like to you, what does a focus state sound like to you, and that's where the artistry really comes in. And my goal was to build this software so students and other people who are interested in this didn't have to figure out, all right, what's web Bluetooth? What Bluetooth packets are coming from this headset? How do I process a brainwave signal into something that's usable? How do I process a PPG signal? So I want to do a lot of that technical heavy lifting to get into a space where you can start making creative choices sooner than later. So that about covers it. I'm happy to answer any more questions that came up, but that's what I wanted to show today in the demo.
Would you, in your practice, would you go completely generative on the music side, or would you also I don't know, have loops of things going on to create a more controlled soundscape that could be fusioned, let's say, or as another element of the other things going on that could be generative?
Totally. I've done both. I've done dozens of prototypes since 2018, and it started with pre-made techno loops. So it was more like DJing with my brain rather than composing and essentially I had these loops that were playing, and I was changing largely the effects and the EQ. And so as I got more excited, the music got brighter and a bit harsher and a bit harder. And as I relaxed, these same loops, I would apply filters and reverb to make it more dreamy and feel it more like the subconscious. And there's pros and cons to the different formats. That one, the nice thing is there was this existing structure for me to fall into. You know, like putting on a headset and getting in front of a crowd and trying to meditate is a bit nerve-wracking. And so when I would perform like that, I would listen to this pre-existing structure to allow myself to fall into the music. And by doing that, I would forget about the crowd and I'd really become more absorbed into these pre-existing loops. After I did that, I did quite a few shows with that. I did a tour. My interest after that was, let's get rid of the quantization. Let's get rid of the safety net and just see, okay, I'm just going to sit and meditate and detect those peaks in the different states and allow this very organic type of music to emerge, where it's these like beeps and bloops and synth sounds that are just bubbling and rising and falling with my mental states directly. I found that those, I didn't do them as long form. They tended to be nicer as just these short little songs, these shorter meditations. And they were more reflective of my mental state in a way, because the activity really wouldn't come up unless I was, having peaks in a certain type of state. And I've had different types of transcendent experiences, both with shaping existing music. That was more of like these, actually quite a few different types of transcend states. But when the notes were being triggered with peaks in my brain, I started to learn more about perception and this idea of I perceive things a few milliseconds after they actually happen. And so I started to feel these discrepancies between when something happened in my brain and when I heard it, to where I would hear it and then experience it in my brain. It was a very strange experience. And so it was like, is there something like a pre-thought where I rev up and that, triggers it? So I started to learn kind of the nuances of, it was more of a meditation tool when these things were being triggered by peaks rather than manipulating the sound. DJing with my brain did feel more performative, but I also got into deep trance states, and then I've got this ridiculous footage of me like ugly crying at a show because I spiraled up into a state of ecstasy and transcendence on stage. I was totally sober and just like crying my eyes out with gratitude. That happened with this like more DJ format. I was still manipulating the sounds, and my brain was totally lighting up on how wild it was that my brain was controlling these sounds coming out of the speakers, controlling the EQ and the effects. But I did have that structure. There was an existing 4/4 structure to tie into. Does that answer your question? I want to make sure I didn't go off track too much.
Yeah, I think it makes it very clear that there's like two ways of going with this into creating as well, and it's a matter of which one to explore and which road to take from there.
And I would say there's a multitude of ways. So, I mean, the idea of creating tools is giving it to other people, and I want you to do something totally different than what I've done, to really explore with it. Another possible way is you just have one sound, like a kind of this rich sound happening, and then each mental state manipulates that single sound in different ways. So, if you have this real clear legibility between I'm going to do something in my brain and then I'm going to hear something, that makes a more powerful neural feedback loop. I found if there's too many things happening and I'm like, wait, is that my focus? Or no, that's noise. Oh no, that's my muscle tension.
All right.
The brain can get a little bit lost and you lose that really nice connection. So there's all sorts of ways that you could sonify. You could just use heart and have maybe one mental state manipulate the beat, change the delay or change a filter EQ on it. Or you can map a single mental state to a ton of different parameters in Ableton. So you're like turning all these knobs at different levels at once. So there's once you get into MIDI, you can route it to Ableton, you can route it to some sort of visualizer. So there's all sorts of inputs and outputs. What I'm trying to do here is to give artists as many inputs that are interesting to them. But as soon as it goes out the software, I mean, it's really up to your imagination what it could do.
Like, I wonder what are ways how that could be incorporated. Could that be possibly incorporated at the same time with those mental states, or they're
definitely
separate?
Definitely, yeah. In that first iteration where I was essentially DJing with my brain, a way that would kind of close things down is to bow, and so the accelerometer could detect when I was bowing and like close the set down, because your brain's not going to just like shut off. So it's like, how do I wrap this up in a way that's organic? The other thing I do with that in some other builds is I look at stillness. So is the person sitting still? And if they're not, is there a way to let them know that they're moving, and it maybe distracts from the other sounds or manipulates the other sounds? And is there a different reward for being still? So those are things that, when you map something over to Ableton, it's not always that a certain thing increases the volume or increases the effect. You can inverse the mapping in Ableton so that when you do a certain thing, it decreases an effect or decreases a volume. So I could have this composition going, and then let's say I'm starting to move around a bit, I could have these different volume parameters at the end of the signal chain and turn those down and kind of pull the sound away if someone's moving too much. It all depends on what you want to reward in the biofeedback loop.
How can I know what mental state someone is when we're trying to practice or get to some places?
Yeah, I think even though the ML model is trained on my brain, it has worked. I've used it with hundreds of other people, and it's pretty consistent. And so in a way, you could use a tool like this or this tool to help you learn what a different state feels like. And so, for example, if you're trying to quiet your mind, you could set up a project where only quiet has a sound, and then attempt to quiet your mind. I mean, frankly, you can just like start looking at your phone and like scrolling, and your mind goes blank. And so you would hear the sonification come up, and then you start to get a sense of, oh, I know what that's like because I hear it in the sound, like the tone comes up or a beep comes up or wherever the sound that you assign to it, and then you move out of that state and then it goes down. And it's like going to the gym. By going back and forth between these different states, and you can either see the bars moving on the screen or you could put sounds to them, you start to practice state shifting. And as you get better at that, then you can start to learn how to overall compose and steer a musical composition or a visual composition. So in the same way that where I can kind of like sit back and stop talking and clear my mind. So I state shifted down, I went through focus, and then that clear mind went over, just because I'm practiced at shifting over into just letting my mind go and letting things fall. So with each person, you could see that you might feel stuck in a certain state, but you can use the software itself to help train you to improve state shifting.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
I wonder if a situation where there's multiple sound sources, like multiple people being detected at the same time, and how that song interacts with each other, or how that can affect each other, of the like two or more different people.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it can work in Chrome. So in Chrome, I've got this page loaded. I can just open a new tab and load a different headset. And so, let's say I turn on, I'll turn on the one of the soft headbands. So tab 1 is the one on my forehead, and then tab 2, connect, is the Muse S. I'm going to pair that. And it'll be all noise because it's not on my head. But now I've got 2 running, and both of them can output MIDI. Now, they can't be on the same MIDI channels. So when I've had that, I've done like a duet with someone where they're wearing a headset and I'm wearing a headset. And what I do is, you know, I may take muscle tension, they take focus, I take clear, they take meditation. And so we each have, so we're not fighting in Ableton over like, you know, who controls meditation. And so you can do a pairing like that. If each person has their own distinct sounds, it helps them understand what is mine and what is the other person's. Because if everyone, I've done these brainwave symphonies where everyone's wearing a headset, there's 6 people, and as they relax, it triggers, there's alpha peaks, and it triggers musical notes in a joint composition. And the real challenge with that is, how does one participant know what their sound is? And the way that I would do it is I would have 3 people by the left speaker and 3 people by the right speaker. And then each of those 3 people had their own octave. So one person was low notes from the right speaker, next person was mid notes from the right speaker, the next one was high notes from the right speaker, and then the same setup on the left, low, mid, high. Even then, there's a little bit of confusion, so if each person would have like their own distinct instrument, that would help. Something I'm considering in some grants I'm writing is, what if you have like 20 people? And in that situation, and you all have access to this at NYU, it makes sense to use spatial audio. And so if I'm sitting in the left corner of the spatial audio lab, I'm hearing just my sounds from the speaker that's by me. And then someone else is in the other corner, you hear just their sounds from there. So someone who's in the middle, they're able to identify, oh, Jason's making some sounds right now because I hear it coming from his direction spatially. Okay, now Crystal's brain is making some music because I hear it from Crystal. So as long as the people are physically separate enough and you have 1 speaker per person, then you could use the same sounds or not have to have such a, you know, a strict relationship between like, I'm a bass sound and Crystal is a you know, a string sound and Michael is a bell sound. So you have to create some way to make it clear who is what sound, particularly with a system like this. There are builds possible where you start to look at synchrony. So are my alpha waves lining up with Crystal's alpha waves? And if they do, can a sound emerge that is just between us? And when we're out of sync, that sound goes away. That would be a different build, but that's something you could do with multiple EEGs.
How would you make that happen when only 2 people get in the same state at the same time? Then they can make a certain sound. How would you say that?
It would probably be another layer on the software, and it might be like a third part of it that's assessing multiple signals. Because right now I've got 2 separate instances. I have made iOS builds where multiple EEGs can connect to the same iPhone app. But essentially you need to get the data into the same container at some point. I could, you know, if inside a P5 you could relay, you know, create another build of this software where you're relaying the signal to a third component. But you need somewhere where there's a few things you could do. You can compare heart rates and heart rate variability. So are people syncing up in terms of sound? I did an experiment with a friend where we sonified my heartbeats and her heartbeats at the same time in Ableton, and kind of listen to, are we matching tempos, or are they striking around the same time? There's a little bit of delay with the Bluetooth, so it felt like our, you know, it's not exactly when the heart beats, and so there was this little bit of a delay, and our heart's trying to sync, but couldn't because the Bluetooth delay, I think. But in terms of synchrony with brainwaves, there's a lot of look at alpha synchrony, and so you could look at the alpha waves going up and down, and there's different levels of sophistication that you could do with alpha synchrony. One thing you could do is, are they both going up and down at the same time? Another thing you could look at is the speed of their going up and down, is that similar? Is that kind of locked in? So are they kind of going up and down in these big slow waves together, or are they kind of, are the amplitudes kind of going faster, and are those similar? So there's different ways you could analyze the data, but a simple way would be just to look at, on the screen, you see this alpha number over here. So right now it's 2 point something, it's flickering a bunch. Is my alpha at a similar amplitude as the other alpha? That'd be a very simplistic way, as these amplitudes are always going up and down, to see if they're like in sync. There's a neuroscientist at NYU, Suzanne Diker, Dikker. She's been a PI on some of the research I've done. She's done a lot of work with artists and writing about synchrony. And so in her publications and her writings, you can see some of the methods she's looked at to try to see if people are in sync. In her portfolio, she tends to work with artists a lot of times in Amsterdam, and then teaming up to explore people together. Are they in sync or not? Anything else? Otherwise, I'm happy to let you all go. I'm very, very grateful for everyone being here. Obviously, you can, Crystal has my information. You can reach out to me afterwards.
Awesome, Jason. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Good to see you all.